We are live. What's going on, my friends? It is Wednesday and it's hot as fuck right now. It's like 88 degrees. I mean, that's not as bad as like California, Arizona heat, but it's pretty warm in my house right now. So, anyway, coming to you live. Hey, what's up, Tyler? Always good to see you. I know you kind of always make your way into the rooms every night, every week. So yeah, it's always good to see you. Anyway, tonight we're doing weathering on this. I started last week with the Tamiya, like the Weathering Master pastels using the applicators we saw here, like these guys. And I moved on to dry pigments and pigment fixer, which is essentially like an enamel-based glue, so to speak. You can apply these dry pigments in two ways. You can either put the pigment on first and then drop on some fixer on top of that to kind of set everything in place, or you can put the fixer down first and then kind of sprinkle on the pigment and let it dry. I think it depends on the effect you're looking for. So I've actually done both on this so far, and most of the pigment I've done is on the turret section, but I'm going to take that off here in a minute and start working on the base, the tracks and everything like that. So but when you're looking for like a crusty where a dirt accumulation, I think it's easier to put the pigment or the fixer down first and then apply the pigment, because then you get a lot of like rough, crusty, grimy look. If you're going for just discoloration, then maybe put the pigment down first and then put some the fixer on there, and then you can spread it around with the brush and kind of blend it as you see. So that's kind of what I started doing on the turret section, and I'll show you that a little bit here. I have to reattach. I picked it up the other day and I knocked off my grill on the back, so I'm going to have to re-glue that. Because obviously I didn't realize it wasn't exactly attached as well as I thought it was, and I kept using it as a place to pick it up, and then it just popped off in my hand. So, but anyway, getting back to this, I'll show you what I've done so far. I got a lot of the pigment on top around the two hatches, and just basically where dirt would settle on the turret, the top of the turret, and then the other areas where you can see those streaking effects, that was done with those Modeling Master pastels. On the side here in the back, you can kind of see where I started doing that other technique where I put down the fixer first and then apply some of that pigment, and then it gets rather heavy and clumpy, and you can add to that as you go. And then, of course, if you don't like what you see, you just add a little bit more, put a little more fixer on the brush, spread it around, and it's all about blending. And I still have all the wheels to do. I did the rear drive axle, but obviously the other wheels are way too clean. I'm going to have to add a little bit of grime there and some of that. So another change you might notice is the loader's hatch. A friend of mine chimed in again. God save you, Joe. He used to be a driver for the M1A1 Abrams, and he's been pointing out little things that I've been doing wrong. And so one of the things was the loader's hatch, and you can see it laying flat now on the back, whereas before, last week, I had both of them kind of in an upright position, like the 50 cal here. That hatch actually is on a hinge that will stay upright, but the loader's hatch apparently is just, there's no piston or spring or anything to hold it up, so it would just flop back. I had it sitting straight up and down, and I was kind of doing that because I was preparing for putting a lot of stowage back there, so I didn't want to have it laying back. But it just wasn't going to work with, they're trying to make this as realistic as possible. He was like, it'll hit the loader in the head. Trust me, I know this, from personal experience. So I had to carefully, I made the decision to carefully cut away the hinge and reposition that hatch. So now it's all glued in place. No need to worry there. It's all done and set. I had to do a little bit of repair work, some touch-ups and stuff, but and now it looks like exactly like it should. And yeah, it was kind of a pain in the butt, but it was necessary, I think, to for this vignette, with the two figures I'm going to be putting in place there. So I'm going to pull the turret off here in a minute and then start or continue weathering the tracks and the top of this, because basically what I'm just adding dirt and grime to areas that would excuse me, where that kind of stuff would settle down into little grooves and crevices and stuff like that. So and then I'll get to the tracks and stuff, kind of working my way from the top down. There is a little bit underneath here. You see in the front, some of those, there's some grime there, and some of that pigment I applied to the body just inside where you'd have transfer from the tracks to the body, and same thing with the back, where that kind of stuff would accumulate over time with a little bit of water, a little bit of moisture, some whether they're going through, even though it's desert terrain, there's still going to be water and some accumulation and stuff like that. So especially if the thing's been out in the field for a while, all that stuff's going to accumulate in these little areas. So, but I'm thinking it looks pretty good. Hey George, good to see you, man. I was hoping you were going to show up tonight. I missed you for a couple weeks, and so we're catching up here. I'm starting to weather the tank. Last week I did a lot of the streaking effects with just using the modeling masters. Now I'm applying pigments with pigment fixer, dry pigments, and a brush. So I'm going to pull the turret off here in a second and start working on the bottom. And there's some underneath you can't see, but I'm putting that stuff in there anyway because that's where that stuff would collect, especially being a tank in the field. And all I'm using is the AK pigment fixer and a brush and a couple of my AIM products dry pigments I've got. This is a lighter color brown. I started using this, but it's pretty close to the color of the tank itself. So I switched that up and I went to a little bit darker medium earth, and that's given me the color discoloration that you're seeing right now. So anyway, yeah, that's where we're at. The figures I still got to paint. I've got those colors set aside here, which I'm going to start eventually painting after I get the tank done. Next week I may or may not do a show. I'm going to say not, only because I've got some family coming into town and I may not be available, even though I want to. Family's more important. I'm going to be hanging out with them, and who knows what we're going to be doing next week. So anyway, that's pretty much where we're at with from last week to this week. Last week, like I said, I was using just these Tamiya, using rust and applying that to the tank, and not because there was rust on it, but because the color was perfect for that kind of a streaking effect. And you can even see some coming off the body here in the front. So everything's kind of washing down. You have to keep all these lines in the right direction with the way this thing is angled. Any kind of rain or any kind of streaking effect, those surfaces are going to wash off in a certain direction. So it was important to get those correct. So that's where we're at. I'm going to pull this turret off here and just set it aside. And now you can see underneath the turret some more of that pigment that I've added around the base to some of those crevices. I'm going to be adding more to the front here. Some of these little pockets of collection areas are along the edge of the armor, the skirt armor, maybe a little bit back here by where the engine covers are. But I used some oils there. I actually used my oil brushers. This is Starship Filth. It's one of the ones I collect, or I had in my set. I'm out shopping and heading to DQ, listening in. Oh, nice. Thanks, George. Cool. That's what I do sometimes on my way into work. I put your show on and I just use my Bluetooth, put it on the speakers in the car, and just listen to it on the way in. So drive into work. So anyway, this oil brushers is an oil-based enamel type. It thins with enamel thinner, and you can do these griming effects with that. And that's what I kind of did back here on the where the engine covers are and the hatches and stuff like that. I may supplement that with some more of the pigment. So, but I just did some the other day just to kind of fill in these areas around where the turn would be. I'm going to put a little bit more in front here, but primarily I think after that I'm going to start working on the tracks, the sides, and try not to knock any of my photo etch off. It's because it's kind of delicate, you know. So as I'm doing all this, I'm kind of manipulating this piece around and trying not to damage it and have to make repairs, which I have done. I will say you don't see that kind of stuff, but I have done it in on the days off when I'm not on stream. So anyway, cheers, everybody. Tonight we're doing Kraken and Coke. Need some bubbles to kind of keep the throat loosened up and talking. A lot of chat. Let me know if you got a question. Do you use tube oils or only oil brushes? Good question, George. I'll put that on screen. I have only used oil brushers. I have not yet purchased any oil paints in tubes yet. This was my first kind of delve into that realm of using oil-based paints for this kind of a weathering effect. So initially when I bought this set, this was the set I bought. It actually has a Millennium Falcon on it. But it was kind of like a set just designed for starships, and that's why I kind of wanted to experiment with it. So no, I have not actually went and bought oil paints, but I did buy a couple of these little weathering sets. Here's another one from MIG, but this is more of washes and dry pigments versus the oil paint. So this is another spaceship sci-fi weathering set. This comes with Starship wash, Starship streaking, and metal slag. The metal slag is the dry pigment included in that kit. So I actually have not used that. I bought it and I with the intention of using it maybe on one of the starships, whether the Falcon or something like the Warhammer stuff, but I still have not cracked that one open and used it. Anywho, let's get started. I'm using this is AIM products again, and I'm kind of hoping they're still in business because their stuff is good. It's really, really intense, dry pigments. The colors are really nice. I've got a few of them that I bought over time. I bought a couple initially, and then I found a set on eBay, I think a few years back, and I bought it just because I really liked in fact, it was one of the Gundam kits I was doing. It was actually if you look at my Facebook page, my Gundamonium Works Facebook page, that diorama that I used for the background image was actually used a lot of these dry pigments on the ground because I had effects of, like exploding, like a crater where there was some damage done to the ground and then dust and stuff on the kit. So I used them a lot then. So, but they work really, really well. So I'm kind of hoping I can still find them eventually if I have to ever restock this stuff. But believe me, you don't need much. And this is, I've used quite a bit of this one. You can see that it's almost at least a third, if not half. Well, no, it's about a third because they don't fill it all the way to the top. It usually comes right to the top of the lid. So maybe about a quarter of this. And I've had that for a couple of years now. So this is the brush I use. It's just this is a Robert Simmons S85 Sapphire number 4. I don't use it for painting. I use this only for applying pigment. And just because it's soft enough, it's got a decent size bristle to it. It collects the pigment nicely, and then I'm able to spread it around. And then I'll switch that up with another brush that I've been using for years. I don't even know where this thing came from. It's so old, but it's my old reliable, and that's what I apply the pigment fixture to. And this is an enamel fluid that's used to, and it dries flat, even though I will end up having to go back over this with a flat coat, because you can see some little outlines where the fluid, dries, even though it does dry flat for the most part. And that's what makes it look nice. It still needs to be sealed, I think, after that. So anyway, enough talk. Let's get going here. So I'm going to grab my magnifier so I can see what the hell I'm doing. Just the other day, I kind of did this around the base here. All this stuff is sealed with the fixer. So the fixer is, like I said, that's almost like a glue, really. It just kind of holds everything in place so your pigments that you're applying don't blow away or come off on your fingers when you're handling your kit. But I'm going to be just going into some of these areas where there would be a collection of a lot of dust and stuff will settle, and see how that works. Right now, I'm going to use the method of, actually, get a little hair right here. One of the things about doing applying a flat coat with an airbrush is if you have any fuzz or anything, fibers from your Q-tips that you used to do your panel lining, it will it kind of lights those up, and it's almost like the flat coat kind of collects on them, and it makes those little fibers stand out more, and makes them easier to see, and you can kind of just pick them off with a pair of tweezers. So as you can see on screen here, I'm just kind of tucking in, this is behind the headlight, one of the headlights. I'm just kind of tucking in a little bit of this, and it'll kind of discolor that surface a little bit too. It's going to be kind of the powder is fine, but it does kind of clump together. So just by kind of dabbing the brush, it loosens it up, and you can spread it around. And then what's nice about the fixer is once I put that on, if it is too heavy in one area, I can just keep kind of applying, using the brush, cleaning it off, and remove any excess that's too much. So obviously we don't want to be overboard, but see, just to start this little area here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to set this aside and pull out the fixer. Again, this is just an enamel fluid. It's clear, dries flat. And I'm just going to drop it on there and allow it to flow. It'll kind of flow out, and just whatever pigment is there, it will keep it in place. And if it's too much, like I said, I can go back, and with the fixer, as I can actually move it around to where I want it, and then leave it alone. And once it dries, it will look really, really nice. I'm pretty happy with this so far because everything is getting nice and grimy. It's kind of what I wanted. I'm still deciding on what kind of base I'm going to buy for it. I got to buy some kind of a wood base, and I want to make sure that it doesn't warp. I had bad luck with the last base I used to make for my Hainu, Gundam Hainu Verka with the heavy weapons. I started using plaster on it, and to try to make like an asteroid type of effect, and the moisture in the plaster just warped the hell out of my base and just turned it into a giant nightmare. Let's see. My wife is texting me. Why is she texting me? She knows I'm on camera. I got too hot to leave the door open. Yeah. I know. Whatever. All right. So you see that little bit of a darker area now, just by adding some of that fixer. And then when that dries, when it's wet, it's a little bit darker. When it dries, it's going to lighten up a little bit. I'm going to just keep going on and add a little more to some of these areas. This stuff does get everywhere. I mean, not all of it sticks to the model, and some of it gets on the bench. And I've got to constantly be like kind of wiping the bench down with, like wet paper towels, just to kind of get rid of some of that pigment. Because all of a sudden you find it's like, why is it all over my hands or my arms? And because it's on the cutting board and it just gets everywhere. I guess it's just part of the process. So just going to keep dabbing here and there. Now, again, one cool part is too, like if any of these areas, like around here, if it's too much, even though it's dry now, if I get some of that fixer and put it on a brush, I can loosen this back up and move it around and even make adjustments after that. It's only once I seal it in the end that it's going to be set. Like you want to make sure you're happy with it first before you actually do your final flat cuts. The nice part is that you can make adjustments and move it around even after your initial coat dries. On the tracks, I actually added the fixer first and then just clumped on the pigment because I knew I wanted a lot of that dirt. I needed to do heavy amounts of it. So only real thing I'm contending with is glare because this stuff is kind of shiny at first until it dries. So sometimes it's kind of hard to see exactly what it is I'm doing. So I got to kind of change the angles. It looks pretty good on camera. I'm actually peeking up and looking at how it looks here. It looks good in front of me, but I want to make sure you guys are seeing the discoloration and those transitions between the lights and darks from the pigment. I will have to go back over this at the end and give it one last shot of flat coat just to kind of hide the edges, because this stuff does, even though it dries flat, it does leave a little bit of a visible like transition line between the original, with the fixer and just the paint that hasn't been touched with anything. So yeah, most of this you're not even going to see because a lot of this is under the turret, but it's important to put those there. So in case I do pose it with the turret turned in a certain direction, I want those areas to be visible. So I'll cap this off and grab my pigment again. A little bit more up here around this little hatch. And one of the things I was doing too is if I get too much, I could just literally just blow it off. If there's too much of it there. That's why it doesn't take much. You have to barely just touch the bristles of the brush in there, and it actually pulls up a lot of that pigment. And really all I'm doing is just kind of spreading it around. Give it a little blow, a little dust. It blows it right off and then just leaves the slightest amount of that pigment still there. But even if you got too much, like I said, you can take the brush and the fixer, apply a little bit of that, and then if you have too much, use a towel, clean the brush off, and then just by using the brush, you're going to remove some of that product. That looks good. All right, I'm going to flip this around so I can get to the other side here. Right. Do this other fender. Do-do-do-do. Come back and fix that. There was a little bit of that fixture over here when I put some of that pigment down, so it actually got kind of clumpy on me. So I can use my fixer brush to go back over that and smooth that out and make it look nice. If you got any questions, go ahead, throw them in the chat. I'll answer them as I go here. I'm kind of peeking up as I go and make sure I don't miss anything. I'm just adding more of this into those kind of dirty areas that would collect a lot of dirt and grime that would settle down in those areas. Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, I actually had an entry once in it wasn't a tank, but it was one of my first Valkyries I built. And I was knocked points because it was too clean. I was told it was too clean to be a spacecraft. And I thought, well, that's a first. So never again will I ever be accused of having too clean a kit. I'm going to make damn sure that my shit is dirty and grimy. On a side note, George, I have been watching you in the mornings and stuff. Probably not as much as I'd like, but I have been catching a bit of your morning show, and I really do love what you've done with that Elan Seeker, right? I believe that's the one you're doing. Your Macross kit. It's looking really cool. I like the customization stuff you've done too. It's very nice. It's just the difference between East Coast and West Coast. Sometimes it's kind of hard to get all of your show. Sometimes when I get those Saturday schedule, I can get up and you're still on because it's a longer show for you. So some of those mornings when I get up to go to work, I can catch you before I go to work. Most of the time I get you after you've already tuned out for the day. Oh, sure. Too clean for a spacecraft. Yeah, that's what I said. I was like, well, their flight crews and stuff would it wasn't coming back from service. It was actually leaving. So my argument was like it wouldn't be that dirty because it was, it was launching, but it is what it is. I just thought it was kind of funny that somebody would actually say, well, it's too clean. I'm like, okay. Judging is what's the term? Judging is can't remember the word for it. You seem to join. I'm getting ready for work or hitting the yeah. Well, that was when I was in Arizona. I was on weird hours over there in Arizona because of what was going on with me. So, and all the stuff I was handling. So yeah, I would wake up at certain times of the day and I'd look at the clock and go, oh, you know what? George is probably on. I might as well chime in and see what he's doing. Yeah, that was kind of entertaining. So yeah, I'm just up going to the restroom. Figured I'd pop in and say hi. Well, but I'm I'm back from Arizona now. I'm not doing that anymore. So I'm just adding. What I'm doing is I'm putting more of this fixture on here, and it's kind of dissolving that pigment a little more, and just blending those areas to. The funny thing is that on camera, it looks very, very bright. Like it's almost too much, like too stark of a contrast between the pigment and the color, but it's actually not. It just looks different on camera a little bit. In person, it's not quite as dark. But of course, once I shoot this again with a flat coat, it will lighten things up a bit too. Because right now, the glossier stuff kind of just looks shinier, or it looks brighter because it's shiny. That's what I was trying to say. Biased, yeah, subjective. That's the word I was looking for, and I just couldn't remember it. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Judging is subjective, yes, and that's exactly what was going on. And that was the old Galaxy Hobby contest I'm talking about. They've been closed for years now, unfortunately. And I just thought it was funny with those guys. It was like almost like a good old boys club. Like, yeah, your Valkyrie's too clean. Okay, whatever you say. Thing was legendary, man. That was the first one I actually, first 148 I actually built was that launch Valkyrie. There's a lot of firsts in that build. That was, I'm real proud of that one, I will say. The second one didn't do so well. I kind of expected it to do well at IPMS this year, but didn't even get so much as a nod. It was interesting year for IPMS. I don't know, maybe I threw it in the wrong category because it was very unclear as to where a lot of kits were supposed to go. They were struggling after being shut down for 3 years and then trying to get back in, and there was stuff scattered all over the place. It was rough, so maybe it was on the wrong table. I don't know. It was hard to define whether it was sci-fi diorama or where it should be considered another category or whatever it was. But anyway, it is what it is. All right, I think I'm pretty good there. This is looking nice. Let's see here. You seem to join. Yeah, already said that. Here we go. So now we're at 6:30. We've been on for only 30 minutes. Feels like it's been longer. All right, I think I'm pretty much done with the top of this. So my next step is I'm going to start working on the sides again, and I'm going to finish this side in particular, which is where a lot of that grime and stuff has been already applied. You can see the rear drive gear here, but I kind of stopped there. I've got to continue that forward a little bit, grime up those other wheels a little bit. And as far as the top, it's looking pretty good. And then when I put the turret back on, it's really going to balance the whole thing out. I think. Anyway, it looks pretty good. Hopefully, I'm not overdoing it. I don't know. It's kind of hard to balance sometimes. You got to make sure you're not doing too much, but trying to make it realistic, real world is kind of difficult. But I think what I'm going to do is just kind of flip this up on its side here. So there's not going to be too much more on the side armor. I think that is good because, again, the tracks are going to toss up a lot of material back here and also coming off the front fenders. So that's where the accumulation is going to be the most. Along this edge, I added a little bit to the bottom. I actually put fixer on the bottom edge of the armor, and then I sprinkled on the pigment on top of that. So there's a little bit of that attached to the side. You can kind of almost looks like splatters, which is perfect. This is what I kind of wanted, was a little bit of that, just minor transfer. But I think the wheels need to be slightly darkened up a little bit inside, and then that will complete the whole. What did Ron say? I have you on a TV and a PlayStation. I'm kaiju sized. Yes. Nice. I think that's the first time I can say that I've ever been kaiju sized. I like it. Thanks, Ron. You really know how to make a guy feel great. I'm already fat. Now you're making me kaiju sized on the screen. Nice. All right, so I'm just going to dab a little. Do I have the right one? Yeah, I do. Okay, this is my medium earth. I'm just going to dab a little bit in each one of these wheels. Go back over with some fixer, kind of blend that around, and that should complete these wheels. Oh, this is really rocking and rolling. Yeah, I'm just going to go around each one of these wheels. I'm just adding slightly, a little bit of dust and dirt in there. If I get too much, I can always remove it with the other brush with the fixer. It's funny how some of these wheels that aren't really, when they're not laying on the tracks, they actually just float freely around because the tracks aren't touching. Once you set it down on the tracks, they stop moving around. That is funny, Ron. That's okay. Angel's got his big, like 85-inch, I think, TV at his house. He puts me on that thing, and it's like massive too. So, all right, just a little bit of pigment needed. There's not much. This stuff, little goes a long way. It's one thing you need to be careful with is because this stuff is so intense, it doesn't take much to really add a lot to it. So you can always add more. It's a little bit harder to take it away. So start small. Now it's time to get some fixer into these wheels. Come on. Hold on a sec, guys. I'm going to add this because I don't know why she's asking whether or not the TV's too loud or something. I can't hear her. I've got my door shut. I'm fine. So now I'm just going to go back in, put a little bit of that fixer in there, and that is going to set that pigment in these wheels. But then I can also go around and, like, a couple of these have a little bit, maybe a little bit too much, so I'm going to go back and I can take some of that back out. But what I'm using is I've got a dry towel here, and if I've got any excess pigment, I can brush it off in the on the towel and then remove a little more. Sorry for the interruption, guys. God. It's not my first episode. You'd think my wife would know that she can watch TV and whatever volume she wants. Doesn't bother me one bit. It's not like I said, it's not like my first episode where you're trying to make sure you're not stepping on somebody's toes. It's like, look, do what you want, babe. I'm good. Okay, now I'm just going to go around and make sure a little bit of dirt. All these have a little dusty around the edges, around the rim of that. Each one of these wheels has a rim, and then the rubber wheel itself. But I'm just going to grab the edge of that, make sure there's some dirt on those. There, looks a lot nicer. I think you can even see that from where you guys are sitting. Once it dries, it's going to darken up a little bit, or lighten up a little bit. Right now it's a little bright because of the pigment fixer. Greetings, what's up? David, how's it going, man? Got a roll. Aw, that's too bad. Good to see you, George. I'm glad you stopped in. Good to see you tonight. Catch you on the flip side tomorrow morning. Hopefully I'll catch more of your broadcasts on the way in to work. Have a good time. Yeah, thanks, bud. Thanks for stopping in. Here on my iPhone, I can watch and cook. Or you'd be on a 75-inch TV. Well, that's pretty big. Yeah, you can put me on the 75, David. That'd be great. We got two Davids in the room. We got David, my friend David, and then a new, I don't know, do I know it? David Suteja. Is that how you say that? Hopefully I'm saying that right. Hopefully I didn't just totally butcher your name. Welcome in, though. Appreciate everybody joining in tonight. So I'm going to add a little more of that fixer, and I'm using that that towel because I got a little too heavy in these wheels. So I'm going to take some of that out, just basically brush it onto my towel. That will get rid of that fixer, or get rid of the pigment, I should say. The fixture's still going to stay there, but by transferring it to the brush and then wiping that on the towel, I'm just eliminating some of that excess that I don't need. I don't need it too heavy in there. But I think that's going to look good the way it is now. All right, let's move. Actually, you know what? I might put a little bit more. I don't know. This is where I'm going to put fixer down first. Because this is heavy, so I'm going to drop some of this right here. Then I'm going to go back over with the pigment and just drop it down. I'll get a little bit on the brush, but that's okay. Because now, with that heavier accumulation, I can take the fixer, my other brush, and move that around. There. Yeah, that looks good. A little too much of the fixer. There we go. All right, let that dry for a minute. Then we can flip it over to the other side. So, for those of you who may not have seen I'm going to let this dry for a minute and talk about a couple of products I bought. I've got another one coming from AK. I bought, so this is for the actual vignette, the diorama, but I've got some really thick, this is a terrain, the AK terrain, this is desert sand, and then I have asphalt. I've got one that's coming called Corrosion, and it's basically you can apply it like it's an acrylic based, almost like a paste, and it simulates, this one will simulate desert sand, and of course this one will simulate asphalt. Because what I wanted to do was have this tank kind of transitioning from dirt to, or sand or whatever, dirt to asphalt. So I want to have those two surfaces side by side. The corrosion one is just something I might use later on, not necessarily on this build, but once I get a plaque that I find, I want a decent sized plaque that I can have enough room to do this on. But I just want this to look like it's running transitioning from desert to asphalt to kind of simulate the kind of surfaces you might find in Iraq, maybe Afghanistan, that kind of area that this kind of tank would be be used. So this stuff dries hard, so you can actually sand it and airbrush on it, or use pigments and washes on it and stuff like that too. So it's really kind of versatile. I like the idea of using this. I'm excited to try it out for the first time. Yeah, on camera it looks intense. Goal on Nurgle. What is that? I want to snort that pigment. No, Ron, we're not snorting pigment tonight. Okay. Maybe on Christmas Eve or something. Maybe not, but not tonight. We're not going to. Yeah, I don't think you want to either. But anyway, back to what we're talking about. So in the next couple of days, I'll have that corrosion. I can't remember if it's called a terrain one, but it's a corrosion effect. Full on Nurgle is the 40K cast. Oh, okay. Well, good thing you told me that, because I didn't know what you were talking about. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I know very little about 40K, other than maybe a convention I went to back in. It was called Universe 87, I think it was. It was probably way before your time, but it was really early on. Warhammer wasn't even a huge thing as it is now then. But yeah, it was pretty fun. It was pretty cool. We stayed up long hours drinking nothing but Jolt Colas and doing role playing, that kind of stuff. So anyway, tomorrow, the next day, I think is when I'll get that corrosion effects one, and I can use that for. I think I primarily use it for rust, because it looks like it has that texture that you can put under something and then paint over it, and it gives it that really, really corroded, rusty kind of effect to it. So now that this is dried a little bit, it's a little less. Hey, Jolt Cola, you miss it? Are you sure about that? You know, the kids in the room are going, Jolt Cola, what's that? Jolt Cola was a thing in, I think it was around the 80s, maybe late 80s. Could be early 90s, but I think it was probably 80s. It was advertised as twice the sugar and all the caffeine, and it was a Coca-Cola type product that you could buy, soda, but it was just full of caffeine and sugar. I mean, it was like the thing that you did if you were role playing all night long. That's what you had on your, especially if you were underage and you weren't drinking. That's what you drank. So anyway, but I'm not drinking Jolt Cola, but I'm an old man now, so I don't have to. So I'm going to move to the other side. I'll show you a comparison. So we've got, I'm carefully picking this up. So once those dry, they will tone down quite a bit. They look rather dark right now, but I think this side is looking pretty good as far as the amount of grime I put on there. So now I'm going to flip to the other side, which pretty much has nothing on it. So you can kind of see where we started from here. There's just some basic chipping that I did by hand. I did paint chipping where the chains are hanging, some of the hinges, things where there would be scratches and stuff like that. Oh, I was going to say, is my chain gun? No, it's still there. So now I'm going to add some pigment to that side to kind of match what I'm going for here. So let me flip this up on its side. Hopefully it doesn't fall over on me. I say that because it tried to on the other side. Also, the side armor is really delicate. For some reason, the way this kit is designed, there's not a bunch of attachment points where this glues on. So you can't even really pick it up, by grabbing, because it flexes everything and it wants to pop right off. So it took me a couple times. I had to glue everything down several times and re-glue it and make sure it was secure. But yeah. Made your teeth wiggle. Yeah, that's true. It probably did. Jolt Cola made your teeth wiggle. I bet it did. You can feel your hair grow with some of that shit. Yeah, it was popular back in the day. I mean, I remember staying up all night playing D&D with my brothers or something, and holy crap, that stuff was was insane. All right, back to pigment fixer, because this is going to be quite a bit of dirt here, so I'm going to apply the fixer first. And I'm just kind of going around the area that I want some of my pigment to attach to. And this is where it gets kind of messy, because the pigment will, as dusty as it is, when you apply it this way, it's going to flick off, and that's why it's good to have a wet towel or something close by, because you have to periodically wipe your bench down, because all this fine powder gets on everything. And kind of what I'm doing here is I'm just collecting some of that on here and just dabbing it down. I'm going to move it around with the other brush, but I just want to get some of those larger clumps there to stick, because that's where, especially the rear drive axle here, this is where a lot of that material would be kind of sloughed off of those tracks and stuck to the frame and armor and everything else. So that's good there. Now, go back over this again. Now I've got the initial fixer down. That kind of holds everything in place. Now I can go back and just kind of touch those areas with the brush. And all this does is just, it lets that fixer flow out and kind of make that a permanent blonde. I can go back through and move this around. Now that it's kind of in a wet condition now, just blending it. If you get too much, take it off your brush, start over. Yeah, looks pretty good. And a little bit more to the top edge here, because this is that one piece of skirt. This is almost like the only piece of armor that oftentimes actually gets removed. I've heard that tank crews kind of get frustrated with this, especially the old version of the rear drive gear. Caused a lot of problems, shear off, issues like that. So that a lot of times they would just take this rear piece of armor off because it was just a hassle. But in this case, I'm leaving it on. I almost considered cutting those off to try to match, to make it as a little more realistic, but I'm going to kind of compare sides here. I want to see. Yeah. Trying to keep things uniform left to right. So add a little more, I think, to this tail light too. This tail light's exposed, it's going to get a lot of that material slung up on it. So it's pretty good. Except for that tail light, I'm going to add a little bit more of that fixer to the bottom and then hit it with some pigment right away. All right, that's good. When I get those kind of chunky, crusty surfaces with this by doing it that way. I don't spread it out. I just let it kind of fix it, and forget it, I guess would be the way to put it. That way it looks just like kind of crusty, almost rusty, really. But it's just that buildup of, it's not smoothed out. It's just, it has texture to it. So I think it works. It works really well. Put a little bit of that inside that rim of this drive gear. Yeah, looks good. All right, now I think I'm ready for those for the wheels, kind of what I did on the other side. So just gonna a little bit of this, spread this out a little bit along this bottom edge, and then I'll go in with some fixer on these wheels. Actually, no, I didn't do that first. I did the pigment first. I really should be capping these each time, because if I knock one of these over, I say that, right? It's going to happen. It's going to make a huge ass mess if I knock one of these over. Either the pigment or the fixer. I don't want that to happen. This is not a fun mess to try to clean up. A little bit lighter on this side because I realized what I did before on the other side was a little too much, so I had to remove some of it anyway. So I'm kind of starting with a little bit of a lighter base on these wheels. Oops. Get off of there. There we go. All right. I've even seen some guys, I've watched a lot of videos on this pigment fixer, and AK Interactive has quite a few videos online about how to use their stuff, and it's really informative. But I've seen guys use like a brush like this and then just kind of flick it on. You know, tapping the brush on your finger, just kind of tapping it so it flicks the fixer on or flicks the pigment on. It really depends on just whatever the effect you're trying to create. There's so many different ways you could do this. But either way, it's really kind of fun creating this kind of a grime, I think. Spinning quite a bit. Okay. Oops. A little bit on this one up front. Can't see that one a whole bunch because it's under the armor. So now I think we're at the point where both sides should look pretty close to each other. So I'm going to kind of, those are almost dry. And then we got this side. It's looking pretty close. So I think that's a good match. All right, give that a second to dry. I may need to go over this a little bit just to kind of pull up some of that, a little bit, maybe a little too heavy in the front here. But I think the key of this is to put the turret on and kind of see what it looks like. See what it looks like together. If it looks nice together, maybe I could take a little bit of that off, but I don't know. I think it looks pretty darn good. It's definitely dirty. I might lighten that up a little bit, just in the front. Again, on camera, it's pretty bright. It's not quite that noticeable in person, but I might lighten up these areas around the fenders just a little bit. But other than that, I think it looks pretty darn good. And then once I get the fingers done, then I got to do all the stowage, and there's just, there's so many steps. Oops, almost lost my tank there. So many more steps here to make sure we finally complete this whole project. Yeah, I want to work on this area up here. I want to, before my brush dries, because this is an enamel product. It is going to dry, so keep my brush wet, and then clean it all off at one time. So I'm wetting this down again, so I can kind of pick up some of that pigment, lighten it up a little bit, and just brush it off. Basically using the brush as a sponge and kind of lifting some of that material, the pigment up, and then taking it off on the brush, or putting it off on my dry towel over here. That's the cool part about this, is you can go back over it even after it's dry. This fixer will kind of reactivate everything, and you can go back and make your adjustments. You know, if you got too much, ooh, that didn't work. If you got too much material, you can just take some of it off. Basically just kind of trying to highlight these high spots and then move the pigment into those lower crevices where they would settle down, where that dirt would accumulate and not necessarily blow away. Like, some of the dust is obviously going to blow off in service, but some of that dirt and grime is going to remain in those areas. So I'm just kind of loosening up what I've already put down and taking a little bit of that away, blending it. There we go. That's better. It's quite a bit lighter. I think I'll do the same for this area here. Just going to add a little bit of that fixer. Remove some of that pigment. There we go. That looks better. Minor adjustment, really, and also keeping in mind that the angle of this panel, so those streaks are going to go in that direction. So as I'm removing that, I'm also making sure my blend lines are in the same direction. Kind of do the same for this other side too, because it's just a little too heavy into this area here. Maybe not so much behind the headlight, but on top of this is where I want to kind of remove some of that and blend it a little bit better. There we go. That's better. And then just let that fixture dry. And once it dries, it'll be nice. You'll see the finished thing, and then of course I'll go over it with a flat coat. That'll take any of that film away, those transition lines, because you see a little bit of that from where the fixture dries. You can see it because it's such a light color too. If this was terrain, you wouldn't even notice it, I imagine. But because it's on a light color tank like this, those you can see that where the product dries. So I have to go back over it and just hide those. That looks good. Yeah, that's better. There's quite a bit lighter. Still some in the grooves, which is what I wanted. I just needed to lighten that up a little bit. And of course, the turret's going to overhang a lot of this, so I can see all of that. But I did want to blend those out a bit. I'm going to wash my brush out now while I'm thinking about it. And I'm just using lacquer thinner. This is straight up lacquer thinner to clean all my brushes. The only one I don't use or don't need to clean is the pigment brush, because I never use that for anything liquid. It's all done with dry pigment. So, all right, let's see what this looks like now. I'm going to put this back on. Let's see if I can line it up. Good Lord, I'm blind. I can't see. There we go. Okay. I think that looks quite a bit better. Yeah, still some of that grime in those areas, but not quite as heavy. Blended quite a bit better, and it matches the turret. So that's the important thing. So both pieces look like they belong. Pretty good. That side, and then I think this was the other side that I did tonight. Still not fully dry in the wheels. It's getting there. All right. Okay, what can I do next? Oh, okay, I know what I can do. I can drink. Let's drink. So I said in the beginning of the program tonight, I may not have a broadcast next week. I got some family coming into town, so I'm going to be entertaining them, and I probably will not have time to do a broadcast here. And also because not on Wednesday, I should say, because my hobby room here is going to be used as a bedroom on the weekend, because I've got some other family, got quite a few people showing up. So I won't have access to my room like I did before, or like I do most days. So I think, anyway, chances are I won't be doing a broadcast next week. But we'll see. Maybe everybody be down watching TV and relaxing. I might be able to just sneak away and pop in and give at least maybe do an hour or something like that. So this thing popped off on me, and so I want to make sure I kind of made some adjustments, because I think the reason the glue didn't hold was because the pieces weren't actually touching where they were supposed to. I thought it was glued in place nicely, but then when it came off, I noticed that it wasn't even really touching one of the spots. So it looks like now it's pretty good. I'm going to have to do some of that transfer too. Now, once I put this on, I realize I'm going to have to add some of that mud and dirt to this cover. But that's easy. I can fix that, not a problem. I just couldn't do it when I went to lift it up one day, the other day, and it actually popped off in my hand. So that's why I just took it off. I'm like, you know what? I'm not even going to try to glue it right now because I don't want to damage it any further. So I made sure that it was fine. What's up? Ty Furious is here again. How you doing, my friend? Good to see you. I'm just talking about this exhaust grill. I got to reattach it because it came off. But we're doing weathering now, adding pigment and dirt and grime. We've got the turret section here pretty much done. I think that's the most I'm going to grind that up. I carefully cut off. I had to cut the hinge off. Actually, no, I didn't cut the hinge off. I cut the door off and repositioned this hatch, the loader's hatch, to be more accurate. Because I guess there's no, this door actually has pistons, or actually has hinges that will hold it in this position, whereas this one just flops over. So rather than have it straight up and down, which is I was making room for stowage and stuff, I'm just going to lay it back. I'll work the stowage around it, and but at least this way it's a lot more accurate and believable that in this position. So I redid that, reattached it, glued it in place, added my pigments and stuff and dirt to make that hinge look nice and grimy like it should. So I think this portion is really ready to go, except for the two figures that I have to install. So just been working on the base here and the tracks and the wheels, and the top section, making sure it's dirty, grimy, dusty, like it's been well used out in the field. So thinking about gluing this back on now, because once I get that in place, then I can actually add the pigment to it and make it match the rest of the back of this thing. I did accidentally knock off one of my fenders the other day, so I had to glue that back on. So I'm going to have to re-flat coat that, because now it's got glue showing where I had to glue it back on. So I'm going to have to do that. It's very delicate with the photo etch. You have to be real super careful, and then doing all this weathering and moving it around, manipulating, it was bound to happen. Fortunately, it didn't happen on camera. I was able to fix it before we got on tonight. But I think I am going to try to glue this back on now that I have it in the right position. And it's fully weathered. You can see all the soot I added to it to make it look like it's covered in exhaust fumes and vapors and dirt and carbon. So let's bust out some of this stupid glue and see if we can glue this back on. I don't think I need my accelerator, but I am going to use one of my Urban Carry pads here that I can put glue on. Typically, when I do this, I use a toothpick or some other kind of applicator to put my glue on. I just use something like this to stage the glue, and then I grab it with my, put a little daub on here. And then I can use my toothpick to apply it. But I'm going to zoom in with my magnifiers because I really want to got to be precise here. Yeah, one of these didn't even get touched. It seemed like it was positioned right, but when it came off, I just realized there was no glue on there at all. Like it just got missed, which makes sense because I was trying not to be like overzealous with the glue. I want to make sure that if I'm putting glue on it, just I'm only putting it what's needed, not going overboard. And so I think by doing that, I missed a little bit. So I'm just going to, and I can make all this. If I got anything I need to touch up, I can touch it up, and then flat coat everything, and it'll be fine. It'll just disappear. So, all right, here we go. All my glue is on. I gotta get this on in position. There we go. There, and come on. It's a precise fit. There we go. Oh, there we go. Okay. Just want to make sure everything is touching. There we go. Okay. Now we're going to let that sit and dry. I'm not going to touch that because I noticed that if I use the accelerator, which is fine, this quick set, insta set, it works good, but it also makes the CA glue that much more brittle, it seems. Where did my cap go? I have a cap for this. Oh, it's still on there. Never mind. Huh. Whoa, what is going on here? What is up with my... Holy crap. That was weird. I looked up on my screen and there was like a bunch of ads like up on my screen. I was like, I thought my stream like shut down without my permission. That was weird. So that's glued. I'm going to let that dry. Now I can see what I got to do to the back here. Now I've got to add some of that dirt and come on, focus. There we go. Once I get the focus, I'll be fine. So once I get those added, it will make this all blend and look nice together again. But lesson learned, I won't be using that as a grab, to pick that up. If I do pick it up, I'll pick it up from underneath again. So now that this is drying, you can really see still a little wet, still a little shiny, but looks really, really good. And it's not quite as bright on camera. A little bit duller. You put the turret on. The important thing is that these two pieces look well together. And of course, I will have this turn slightly, the turret turn slightly, but so far so good. Almost there. All right, boys, what do you think? Pretty good so far. This brush is clean. All right, what do you think, boys? Tell me what you think. Boys and girls. I don't know if we got any girls in the room. Probably not, but it doesn't matter. It's all good. Everybody's welcome. You know what you think? Looking smexy. Nice, Tyler. Thank you, David. I appreciate it. I think Dave might be having me do a commission for him not too long, I think. Maybe we'll start that after this project. Oh, one of the other things I do have to do is I have 2 antennas I have to make. I guess we could do that too. So have you ever seen this done before? Let me see, where's my lighter at? I gotta find my cigarette lighter. I don't usually use one, except for this time. Here it is. Tyler's probably got 3 of them on hand just as we speak. But I'm going to do this as a little bit of an experiment right now, just to kind of show you. You move this aside. I'm going to cut off a piece of runner here. See if I can do this. If not, then I will. But basically making antennas using runner. I'm sure you guys have seen this done before, but for those that haven't, we're just going to kind of melt this with the lighter and then stretch it apart. Very excited for that. Oh yeah. Yeah, I know. So we're going to stretch it apart, and then we'll have a piece, once we let that cool, of a nice thin piece of plastic that we can cut to whatever length we want to make our antennas. I'm obviously going to glue those on last. So I'm just going to kind of start this up, just kind of heat it up, and then stretch it out just like that. And I'll let that cool. I'm going to kind of lay it down. Doesn't matter if it's super straight, but we want to make sure it's kind of straight. We can always bend it. Now that that's cooled, see that dangling there, I can cut this off to any length I want, and I'll have a nice antenna. Let that cool just a little bit longer. Start, zoom in a little bit. I say zoom in because I'm using my magnifiers. So now we cut this off here and here. Grab the tweezers. Oops. Now, in case this is too big on the bottom of it, there's actually 2 holes where these go. If it's too large, I can just cut it a little bit higher up. But look at that. We put that in there. Now that's not glued, of course, but there you go. That's one down. It's actually, I can make a new one. This one's actually slightly smaller than I would like. Actually, it fits better in that one. There's 2 different types of setups here. So I'm going to cut this. I'll cut it a little bit shorter, but that's pretty good. Right where it's at. See? Let me tilt that up so you can see it. Yeah. Works out nice. And that's how that's done. Pretty simple. Just have to heat up the plastic and stretch it apart, and then trim it off to the length you want, and you got yourself a nice antenna. A lot of the aircraft builders use that for doing, the pieces between, from the tail rudder to the, some of the older aircraft had wires going from the tail rudders up front, and they do that same kind of method to create those wires. And then you can use your standard glue, your regular Tamiya thin cement, to glue it. It's not a piece of something that's going to be harder to glue. They have to use CA glue on. You can actually just use the plastic glue. It's actually a little bit thicker on the other end. I could actually turn this over. Yeah, either one will work nice. So I'm gonna have to save that because that one came out perfect. How are we doing? We're almost to an hour and a half, which is pretty much my routine for my shows. I get done. Anybody got any other questions before I call this one and put it in the books? Let's see. Hopefully by, like I said, next week I may not do a live stream. More than likely not. But I am going to try to at least get started on the figures. I have to reshoot these with primer, make sure that the shoulder seams are good before I start painting them. A lot of it's going to be hand painting. Primarily, their uniforms are all going to be done in desert camo, and that's what all these colors are for here. I am going to airbrush. I'll probably airbrush the base color, which will be the lightest. Oops. I think it might be this or this. One of these two browns will be, actually, I think it's this one. That's going to be the base of the camo, their uniforms. So I'll probably shoot that with the airbrush, and then shoot their faces and hands and stuff like that with the flesh color. But then the rest will be all hand painted camouflage, including the brown, the black, the white, all those to create that desert camo. So maybe I'll get started with that next week. Maybe not. I don't know. Again, I'm going to be on vacation. I got family coming in, so we're going to be spending time with them, and probably won't be doing a lot on this model until the following week, and then maybe we'll see an update then. Here's one of those little MRE boxes that will go in the back. Make sure that we have all the stowage, and of course I got this kit here. This is my stowage set. I still have to prep and clean all of these pieces, or at least the ones I'm going to use, and pack up this whole back area with stowage. So once I get the weathering done on this and seal everything, and then I can start working on that and the figures and the base. So we've still got a few more steps to go, but it's starting to come together. It's looking really nice. I'm happy with it so far. And I think that I've made this dirty enough. I just need to blend a little bit of the back here with that new, with the addition of that exhaust grill. But other than that, I think I can leave the rest of it pretty much alone. I've got enough weathering on everything to really look nice once I've put my final fly coats on. Anyway, with that being said, guys, I appreciate everybody coming in tonight. We had quite a few, I think quite a few new people watching tonight, and that's awesome. I appreciate it. Appreciate all your support of this art form, and I appreciate you guys telling your friends, let them know, checking me out every week. It's awesome. I have fun doing it. I'm really glad I started this channel, and yeah. So anyway, next time we will see you maybe in 2 weeks. Oh, of course, Julius, now you're coming in right at the end, of course, right? I'm getting ready to sign off, and here you are. Hey, Mike, what's up, buddy? So anyway, be good humans. Continue doing what you do, creating, building models, whatever it is, whatever your hobbies are. Keep doing what you do. But again, thank you so much for joining in, and we'll see you next time, probably in 2 weeks. Maybe not. I might do a surprise visit next week, but don't count on it. So we'll see you then. Talk to you soon, guys. Have a good afternoon.